Hey there everyone! Now, with many of us cooped up at home at the moment, it means that many of us have got plenty of time to go through a whole bunch of our games. Now, some of you may have even thought about getting out one of your old game consoles from like the loft or the garage, just to pass the time really. Now, that probably means for some fishing out your old NES, or firing up your old Master System for old time's sake. But for me, that meant spending some quality time with my very first gaming console, the original Atari VCS. Now you might be thinking, ugh, that's over 40 years old, what could it possibly offer? Well, if you want to play anything from the golden age of Atari, allow me to recommend some titles that you should try out. Hello fellow gamers, and these are just some of the games that you must play on your old Atari. So the first of the old Atari must-play games that I want to mention is Berserk. This came out originally in 1980, and it's a top-down, randomly generated maze game, and each screen is filled with robots. You control this little guy who can move around the maze, and you can shoot at all of these robots. You can shoot up, down, left, right, and you can shoot diagonally as well. Now the robots can shoot back at you, but as you can probably see on this footage, they're not very clever. They can be destroyed by a shot from you, or from shooting each other, or from touching the electrified walls of this maze. But the thing is, all of these can kill you as well. Now after progressing through a couple of screens, the difficulty kicks up. The robots change colour, they become faster, and they're much more aggressive. And that's really what Berserk is. It's an endless, randomly generated maze shooter. Eventually, after many more screens, you're going to find yourself dodging really fast shots from the robots whilst avoiding these electrified walls. It's a really simple idea, but the action really heats up, and I would definitely recommend this to anyone who wants to play the old Atari. Now, 2018 Spider-Man may have been one of the best-selling games on the PS4, but I was playing Spider-Man all the way back in the 80s. The idea of this title was that you were facing the Green Goblin who had planted bombs on the top of all these buildings. You needed to scale these buildings in order to defuse the bombs and, wherever you can, capture any criminals you can find on the way up. Now, as our friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man, you can move straight up the building and you can move diagonally, but if you miss any part of the building, you'd start falling. Luckily, you are still able to shoot out your web to grab onto the building mid-fall, if you're lucky. Now, you need to be careful because criminals can cut your web line if they've come into contact with it. And you only have so much web to get up the building as well. Once you run out, you're done. Now luckily, capturing criminals on the way up and defusing bombs at the top does give you more web, strangely. And when you reach the top, you need to avoid the Green Goblin and touch the last bomb at the top to defuse it. And once you've done that, you've completed the level. Every level is made up pretty much the same, but the design of the girders and everything might change per level. It's actually a rather fun take on Spider-Man. The basic wall web slinging mechanics are there, and you have a slightly recognisable baddie to face off against when you reach the top. So if you've got an old Atari lying around, give this title a shot. Now the next must-play game that I recommend that you try on the old Atari is E.T. Well, I did title this video Must Play Games. I never said they were all good ones. So yeah, history has, well, American history anyway, has shown us that this was such a bad game that it caused the US gaming market to crash back in 1983. We've all heard the story. The US market was flooded with so many poorly made games and, well, to use an idiom, this was ultimately the straw that broke the camel's back. But of course I was never affected by this because I'm in the UK and we were more focused on microcomputers rather than video game consoles. But I recommend this game because now we have the benefit of hindsight. We now know that the programmer, Howard Scott Warshaw, only had like 5 weeks to write the game. He met Atari's tight deadlines, but you can only imagine that he had to cut a lot of corners in order to do that. I bet if Atari had approached him earlier, he would have had the time to make it a much better game. Now I'm suggesting this game because, well, every gamer really should experience it. Once you play through it a couple of times and familiarise yourself with the bugs you'll face, you'll really see what Mr. Warshaw was trying to achieve. And to be fair, you can't fault him for what he was able to do with that limited time. I mean, the game loosely follows the film from beginning to end. There are a number of little tricks to help you to avoid enemies and to find those parts of the telephone you need to call home. And heck, there's even a flower you can bring back to life if you like. And not to mention the graphics are actually pretty good given the time. But let me put it this way, would you rather play this or Superman 64? For me, it would be E.T. every time. I'll tell you what, let's help restore Mr. Warshaw's reputation by moving on to one of his best games instead, and quite frankly it was one of the best selling games on the VCS, Yars Revenge. Now, like with a lot of the early Atari games, there were limitations on the graphics in those days and you often needed quite a bit of imagination. Yars Revenge is no exception. Now the aim of this game is to destroy the alien attacker, a quartile, on the right of the screen. Now you control a fly or insect-like creature called a Yar. Now you can fire at the quartile's shield to break it away to get a clear shot with your Zorlon cannon. This is represented by that little block on the left hand side. To arm it, you needed to either touch the quartile or you needed to eat one of the pieces of its shield. Now hitting the quartile requires really good timing and a clear shot, so if the shield is still there, well, you've got no chance. Throughout your playthrough there's a destroyer missile following you wherever you go, and if it makes contact with you it will destroy you. Now the weird thing is that in its time it had some pretty poor reviews and it was considered a really repetitive game, you know, because a lot of Atari games aren't repetitive anyway. But today it is considered an absolute classic. In fact, and I didn't know this until I was researching this video, there was a remake of it on the Xbox 360's marketplace in the guise of an on-rails shooter. Now this is right up my street and I'd love to try it out someday. In the meantime, we've got this absolute gem. Give it a shot. So to finish off this list, I thought I would go for another movie franchise, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Now this was named after the entire film, but it only focuses on the Battle of Hoth at the beginning. The idea here is that you are controlling a speeder shooting down a horde of AT-ATs, and the goal is simple, shoot at them until they're all destroyed. But they just keep on coming. The AT-ATs change colour the more that you shoot them. They go from a full strength, which is like a dark grey, all the way to yellow before they finally explode. There is a little bit of tactic involved in this though, because sometimes there will be a flashing pixel appear on the AT-AT's body. This indicates their weak spot. One straight shot at that and they blow up instantly. Now this is another example of an endless old Atari game. The AT-ATs just keep on coming and you just keep on shooting them down. There's really no successful ending on this. The game only ends when you lose all your lives or the AT-ATs reach the enemy base, which is on the far right of the map. So yeah, it's an endless scrolling shooter, but I've had hours and hours of fun from this, all the way back in the 80s, and I even had a lot of fun playing it now. You definitely need to play this if you're setting up your old Atari again. So there you have it. Next time you pull out your old Atari VCS, keep these games in mind. Or at the very least, I hope that you've enjoyed watching them anyway. But let me know what you thought of the video with a like or dislike down below, or even leave a comment about any other Atari VCS games that you'd recommend everyone try out. But anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.